The year was 1787. Delegates from 13 fledgling states gathered in Philadelphia, tasked with the monumental task of drafting a constitution for a new nation. The United States, newly independent from British rule, grappled with the question of how to structure a government that balanced the interests of large and small states, while also addressing the contentious issue of slavery. This delicate balancing act, fraught with political maneuvering and moral compromises, laid the groundwork for the Electoral College, a system forever intertwined with the legacy of slavery. At the heart of the debate was the question of representation. Larger states, with their greater populations, favored a system of proportional representation, where each state's influence in the new government would be determined by its population size. Smaller states, fearing domination by their larger counterparts, advocated for equal representation, ensuring that each state, regardless of population, would have an equal voice. This fundamental disagreement threatened to derail the entire constitutional convention. Adding fuel to the fire was the divisive issue of slavery. Southern states, heavily reliant on enslaved labor, viewed their enslaved populations as both an economic necessity and a source of political power. They demanded that enslaved people be counted in determining a state's population, thereby increasing their representation in the new government. Northern states, many of which had already taken steps to abolish or limit slavery, opposed this demand, arguing that it would grant slaveholders disproportionate power. The delegates, faced with the daunting task of forging a nation from a collection of states with vastly different interests and values, knew that compromise was essential. But the compromises reached, particularly on the issue of slavery, would have far-reaching consequences, shaping the political landscape of the United States for generations to come. The contentious debate over representation in slavery ultimately led to one of the most controversial compromises in American history, the 3/5 Compromise. This compromise, enshrined in Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, stipulated that each enslaved person would be counted as 3/5 of a person for the purposes of determining a state's population, and therefore its representation in the House of Representatives and the Electoral College. This compromise, while seemingly a pragmatic solution to a complex problem, was, in reality, a Faustian bargain. It granted Southern states disproportionate political power by inflating their population counts, thereby increasing their representation in the Electoral College. This advantage allowed Southern states to exert outsized influence in presidential elections, often tipping the scales in favor of candidates who supported their interests, including the preservation of slavery. The 3/5 Compromise was a testament to the political expediency that often trumped moral considerations in the early years of the United States. It was a stark reminder that the nation's founding principles, while espousing liberty and equality, were often applied selectively, with the rights of enslaved Africans sacrificed on the altar of political compromise. The 3/5 Compromise had a profound impact on the early political landscape of the United States. Southern states, armed with their inflated representation in the Electoral College, wielded significant power in presidential elections. This advantage allowed them to elect candidates who were sympathetic to their interests, particularly the preservation of slavery. Of the first 12 presidents of the United States, 11 were either slaveholders themselves or hailed from slaveholding states. This dominance reflected the South's outsized influence in the Electoral College, a direct result of the 3/5 Compromise. Southern presidents, beholden to the interests of their region, often pursued policies that protected and expanded the institution of slavery. The Missouri Compromise of 1820, the annexation of Texas in 1845, and the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 were all examples of legislation that reflected the South's political clout. These measures, while deeply divisive, were enacted in part due to the South's ability to leverage its Electoral College advantage. The long-simmering tensions over slavery finally erupted in 1861 with the outbreak of the Civil War. The war, a brutal conflict that pitted brother against brother, ultimately decided the fate of slavery in the United States. The Union victory in 1865 led to the abolition of slavery, enshrined in the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. The Civil War and its aftermath marked a turning point in American history. The nation, once divided by the issue of slavery, embarked on the challenging path of Reconstruction, seeking to rebuild the South and integrate formerly enslaved people into American society. However, the legacy of slavery cast a long shadow over the nation. The Three-Fifths Compromise, while rendered moot by the abolition of slavery, continued to have implications for the Electoral College. Southern states, no longer able to count enslaved people towards their population, still benefited from the compromise's original intent, which was to grant them disproportionate power.